So I'm speaking with composer Rolfe Kent, who has demonstrated his versatility as a storyteller across many different genres and has built lasting collaborations with directors like Alexander Payne and Jason Reitman. Rolfe is known for his music in films like Up in the Air, Sideways, Legally Blonde, Wedding Crashers, About Schmidt, and many, many more. Recently, Rolfe scored the Laurel and Hardy biopic titled Stan and Ollie. Rolfe, thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, thank you. Nice to be talking to you.
Of course. So to start, I know we did a more in-depth interview kind of last year, but I'd love to kind of revisit your background and your story and your path to becoming a composer. So I was wondering if you could talk about kind of when in your life did you find music, or did music find you, however you see it, and what point did you decide to make it a career?
My earliest recollection is of the age of about 5, going to see some local theatre company in a small town, and just being absolutely mesmerized by the little trio, bass, drums, and piano. And so that's my earliest recollection of being intrigued with music. And because it was around then that I sort of demanded to learn double bass, because I had been so inspired by seeing the bass player. And my mum talked me down to a violin, which I have to say, for an adult to tolerate the sound of a child scratching a violin is a real misstep on her part. But that's that bit. And in terms of becoming a composer, I think I just did it sort of automatically. I was just sort of doing it anyway. And then around the age of 12, it occurred to me that when you came home from the cinema, you remembered the music, and so that music already had associations for you, even though you'd never heard it before. From this point onwards, you connected that music with a memory, and I thought that's great. It's like our song. You having a strong association with a brand new piece of music. So around 12, I thought, if I'm going to be a composer, I should write music for films, because it has those associations, and it just seemed like a great, powerful way to be doing music.
Absolutely. So what was kind of your first step to getting your foot in the door? I mean, a lot of young composers either take up apprenticeships or kind of get a big break or something. What was your kind of first moment where you kind of like, okay, I'm now a professional composer?
Well, the first step was nowhere near being a professional composer, but the first step was sort of talking about it and being in bands. And then I was chatting to a friend of mine at university, and he was writing a play for the university theatre group to take to the Edinburgh Festival. And he said, well, you want to be a film composer, why don't you write the music for this play? And so I did. And so that was really the first step. I also wrote music for a local college for their dance program and stuff like that. But that was really the first time I sort of did this kind of job of writing music for drama.
Right.
And yeah. And then from that point onwards, it was doing lots of music for student films and things like that. But no, I didn't have an apprenticeship as such. I just sort of tried to persuade people to let me write their music. And then that turned into getting some documentaries and some short bits of television drama. And then that got me on the way.
Absolutely. So if you had to describe your music and stylistic sensibilities to someone who's never heard your music before, how would you describe yourself? Like if you had to kind of look at your music in a mirror.
Oh God, I don't know. How would you describe it? I'm too subjective. Right. How would you describe it?
I think you're very in tune with character and building kind of an emotional undercurrent. And your themes are very, while they're not like over bashing you over the head, but they're so kind of like, I don't know. It's like using a fine needle. I would describe your music as kind of a nice fine needle, kind of weaving its way through the picture. I don't know if that's how you see
interesting.
It. That's what I love about your music.
But if I didn't know anything about music, I still wouldn't know what kind of music that sounds like.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, so I guess, I don't know, maybe it's easier for me because I'm not a musician. I kind of look at it completely from a visual sound storytelling point of view, but I don't know.
Right. Because I tend to, when people ask me that question, I normally just go, well, it's sometimes orchestral, it's sometimes small groups. It really varies. I really like melody, and
Right.
that's the best I can do. Sometimes it's jazz, mostly it isn't, but it's often inspired by some jazz sensibilities. But my favorite composer growing up was John Barry,
Oh,
which
yeah.
now I fully appreciate. I don't sound like John Barry, but and it was for me because I was intimidated with it by the idea of writing for orchestra. It just seemed like, wow, you've got a room full of musicians. How can you possibly come up with an idea for each of them to play? And then listening to John Barry and also Tchaikovsky, both of them had this really sort of elegant and simple way of writing, and the result was that you could, if you look at it on paper, you just go, oh, that's actually doable. It's like 4 elements, and it's not 32 or 96 elements. It's 4, and they weave. So they balance so well, they counterbalance so well, and it's quite doable. I mean, pop music is basically 4 elements, or sometimes less. But
Right.
so that's when I sort of got my mind around the idea that this was actually doable.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's jump and talk about Stan and Ollie, which is I really love the film. I think it's something that was special. I wasn't expecting how emotionally resonating it would be with me, and I grew up watching Laurel and Hardy, and so to see it was not just as a fan of Laurel and Hardy, but it was a great story. So how did you get involved
I was
with
the
this
same.
film?
I didn't expect it to be particularly resonant for me either.
Really, that's interesting.
I took it on. I took it on because I really liked the director, and I just thought the director was going to be is a great storyteller, and I just thought it would be great to be working with him. But I didn't think, I thought Laurel and Hardy. I've seen Laurel and Hardy films as a kid, but I wasn't particularly drawn to watching them again.
Right.
But then in working on it, as you say, it speaks to you much more than you would have expected.
Oh
And
my God, yeah, very much.
but maybe that's substantially down to great storytelling and great performances. I mean, Steve Coogan, I've never seen him disappear into a role so beautifully as he did in this one, where you don't know it's Steve after a while. You've just seen Stan Laurel,
Absolutely.
and the same for John C. Reilly. Just an extraordinary performance. So. Anyway, carry on. What were you asking?
So yeah, but when you first came on board, what were the I guess the initial discussions about music? Because with biopics, it's very easy to become. I guess I don't know. I find a lot of them to be kind of melodramatic and overdone. But this one seems so natural and organic, and the emotions seemed very real. So what were the discussions you had about the music, and what was the approach you eventually took?
John Baird, the director, was very keen to. Well, our initial discussion was: do we want to do a period score, or do we want it much more contemporary? I mean, you could go full Chariots of Fire on it and have it just nothing to do with period at all. I brought up Saving Mr. Banks, which is a beautiful score, but doesn't really speak to period. It actually simply speaks to emotion and storytelling, and I really liked that idea. I thought, the Saving Mr. Banks approach, Tom Newman's approach, lovely. And John Baird was going, we need more sense of legacy. We want to make sure that we embed ourselves in a little bit in the past. But so what we end up with is something which has it references the past, and hopefully leaves it open. It's certainly not music of the period, but it's inspired by the sort of my feelings about silent movie and early talkies, and my recollection of their theme. I actually deliberately never listened to their theme at all during the writing of it, because I didn't want to be sort of pushed around by. Right. The sort of hemmed in by the parameters of their, of music that existed, but I wanted to be inspired by the idea of, the memory of what that felt like and how that felt. So there are definitely little references to their theme, but as I say, I had not listened to their theme at all. So that dum 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 that occurs a little bit in the music. Very deliberate, and really just to please John Baird, so that you go, oh yes, good, we've ticked that box. But actually, when you listen to it, when you listen to it, you just go, oh yeah, that's a reference to the theme. But in fact, you never hear that figure quite like that at all in the original music. So I did, I was quite pleased. I did the job without sort of crossing the lines I didn't want to cross. So it ends up being a sort of modern score with a lot of gestures to the past. That's Absolutely. What I'd say.
Yeah, and how did you treat handling kind of two protagonists? You had, two of them. Did you treat them separately? Did you kind of treat them as one unifying thing? Like, how did you kind of approach these characters?
Essentially as one thing, but the use, and I remember this from the theme, that there's the clarinet and the bassoon, or the sort of the high and the low. And so in Woodwind, just thought Woodwind speaks, in my mind anyway, to the silent era and the early talkie era, that sort of Dixieland kind of sound. So I thought, why not use the high clarinet for Stan and the bassoon for Ollie? And so we do have a little bit of that juxtaposition, but it's not that they have separate themes. It's really just that we ended up using those instruments in ways that simply echoed the nature of the relationship. And it's most profound, in my mind anyway, when there's that little comedy sketch when they arrive at a hotel earlier on, and there are these little exchanging. It's a sequence which is the most like Mickey Mousing music, or most like silent era music. It's got that kind of nonsense going on, and that was very deliberately, choosing the instruments to match the character. But otherwise, the main idea of the music is about their relationship, about how they're getting closer during this tour, and so yeah, really the music is thematically about the pair of them, not about the individuals.
Right. I also loved how you handled, just the film itself and the music handled the tone of the movie, because I found it, towards the end, it got really heavy with me. It was just, we're talking about how you didn't expect it to move you so much, but it has this kind of theme of nothing lasts forever. Our time in the spotlight will one day fade. And the quote that Ollie says, "I'll miss us when we're gone." There's a lot of like deep levels of existentialism going on, and so how did you approach this the tone of the film, because it does get heavy and serious at times, and of course there's kind of some lighter moments, but it's really a drama more than anything.
I just feel my way into it. There's no real way of describing it. You just try things out, and quickly you discover when you write something and try it against the picture, you quickly realize whether it's working or not. And definitely with the involvement of John Baird in navigating that, but that's really it. Just feeling it through and discovering how to handle it. For me, there's that ending sequence which was a gift to me. A gift to any composer really, because it's this protracted sequence which has no sound other than music.
Yeah, you're on the spotlight there. Yeah.
Yeah, so you get to do whatever you want, and that's really where the emotional melodies can soar and really pull the heartstrings, because we know that this is, as you say, this existential moment of the end of things.
Yeah,
and that was amazing to do.
Absolutely. You mentioned that end scene. You also mentioned the hotel moment, but is there any particular moment in the film that really stood out to you, that you loved writing the music for, and that was kind of a joy for you, kind of creatively got you going?
Well, there's one bit which I love listening to it now. It was very difficult to do, partly because me and John just couldn't agree about what was supposed to be happening. But there's a montage sequence when you see them traveling around the country gathering momentum, and there's this map showing you them going from city to city to city, and the music is very lively, very energized. And I came up with that idea, and I loved it, and John hated it, so I came up with another one. And and he did the second one. I was going, oh God. And it's one of those moments where I'd left it really to the end because I knew it was just going to be a nightmare. And I dreaded that he'd already fallen in love with a piece of temp score. And he'd go, no, I haven't. So so I left it until pretty much the last minute. And then I sort of pulled out all the stops and had another go. And I was so happy when he approved it and it was all good. And it's also a lovely, lively piece of music. It's got a big energy. So that sequence, when I listen to it, I just go, oh, very satisfying. But I know that it was partly satisfying because it was torture to get there. But
the reward was worth the journey.
Yeah. Also, the very ending titles. So, as you say, it gets quite sort of existential, quite emotional at the end. And but then you've got to send the audience out with with some of the actual energy of how of Laurel and Hardy, of that buoyancy and life. And so I've written a piece of music which matched. We have these old sequences of Laurel and Hardy dancing, and I'd matched the tempo precisely. I got it perfect. It was as if they were dancing to my music. And John heard it and went. This was the day before I went into the studio, and he went, "No, it's not working for me." And I was going, "Oh God, no, not another one of these." And thankfully, my music editor Nick said, "Why don't you base something off this other cue?" And I went, "Okay, we'll try that," and did that. And it was the whole ending title sequence, which is quite a substantial bit of music with a lot of energy, a lot of big orchestration. And I did it. I rushed it off that day, went in the studio the next day, and it was all good. It was all approved, and that also very satisfying. And it's also satisfying because you've been when you watch the film, you've been through this whole emotional arc, and you've come down to this place, and then finally you get this, and it really does seem to lift the spirits. And it's largely because you're watching Stan and Ollie capering on screen, but it really has a sense of delivering you to a really joyous place.
That's incredible, because I don't think a lot of people really take a look at. I mean, I'm one of those people who sits in the movie theater and watches the entire credits because I just kind of take in everything that I just saw. I know a lot of people leave the second the lights come up, but I mean, just to sit there, and how you did that was amazing. I've been to movies where they cut to the first title card and it's just like a completely piece of source music or needle drop that's just completely off tone of what we just saw, and it kind of ruins the whole movie almost.
Yeah.
It's like you watch a serious thing. So I'm glad that you took all that time to make it work.
Yeah, no, and John had said that I didn't have to. They could reuse something, but I just thought, no, this is an opportunity to do something really good. And so anyway, yeah, good. Thank you. Thank you for appreciating it.
So yeah, I mean, congratulations on the film. I really loved it. I think it's really special. I hope a lot of people seek it out because I know it's kind of smaller independent films, but kind of looking outside of your film music, you do keep busy with other projects, which I love to see, kind of how you're creative in these other realms, of course. And you have these different types of experimentation and design and sound design things. And I wanted to ask you about the Unmarked Door, which I think is really cool. So in your own words, what is the Unmarked Door?
The Unmarked Door is an immersive theater company, specifically trying to do things with sound and music. It seems like I love immersive theater. There's Punch Drunk, who are in London and New York, and there are lots of other amazing immersive theater entities like Secret Cinema in London, but very few do live music and do music in an interesting way. So I created this theater entity specifically to embody my love of immersive theater, but also to take it in a musical direction and see what that would look like and how that would feel. Because I love this idea, I love flash mobs. I love the idea that you're in a restaurant, suddenly, it seems like suddenly there's a song going on from one random person at one table, and then 2 lines later, there are people at every table singing, and you just go, what the hell is happening? And I love that sort of sense of hair-raising excitement. You just go, oh my God, this is incredible. So that's what I want to, that's what I love. That's what I'm very driven to. So that's what the Unmarked Door seeks to create.
And I mean, what is the reaction? What is your? How does it feel to like see an audience react in real time to what you're presenting?
Well, it's intriguing. Audiences are different every night because performances are actually slightly different every night. But it's amazing. It's amazing, and it's great fun. And one of these days I'll figure out how to break even. But it's an absolutely life-affirming thing to do.
Yeah, and I see you have one, I think, planned for March of this coming up year. Is that the next production?
Yeah, March may be a little sooner than it actually happens, but we'll see.
Oh, well.
Yeah, it's a very exciting project. Cool. I hope you do.
Yeah, definitely. So going back to movies, kind of to wrap things up, is there any other creative role on a film besides composer that you would ever want to take a crack at? Maybe like writing or directing, or I think John Powell had his answer was stuntman, but I don't know if you have, is there any other role that you've ever wanted to do that you've never had the chance to do?
Well, I have produced a film.
Right,
and that was amazing. That was great. It's very right brain, and whereas composing is which one is it? It's very left brain, whereas composing is very right brain. So they don't sit well together. But producing was fantastic, and in fact, that's why I felt capable of producing theatre. Is because I've done a film. How different can it be? But no, I don't want to direct. I don't want to act. I don't want to write. So I think, but I love sound, and so I would love to do sound. Is it sound editing? I think it is. I think they call it sound editing when you actually create sounds. It's like the sound of the Millennium Falcon. I remember seeing a documentary, and they were talking about the Millennium Falcon not starting in. That was in the second of the Star Wars films ever, and they used the combination of the piping in the bathroom at the studio, which when you turn the tap, it sort of sang. It sort of so they went and recorded the bathroom and a few other things, and that became and that just seems. That would be my second choice, is to create sound effects and do amazing things like that.
Yeah, those are. I mean, those people who do that are. I mean, it's such. I mean, I know. I always watch the documentaries and stuff. I know, like with Jurassic Park, they recorded a lion for the T-Rex, and all just changing the world that we know it and kind of turning it on its head to become something else. I think is super interesting. Absolutely.
Yeah, love it.
But Rolfe, I just wanted to thank you for your time today. It was so great chatting with you and catching up. And I want to congrats again on Stan Ollie. It's such a great film and a great score. And of course, I'm always looking forward to what comes next. So thank you.
Super. Thank you so much. Real pleasure chatting.